Picture this. A compound in Seongbukdong. High walls, 16 guards on rotating shifts. A fortress built to look like an estate, designed by a man who understood that the most dangerous threats are the ones you invite inside. Now picture a girl, 18 years old, blind since birth, sitting in a study she has memorized down to the number of books on the third shelf from the left. She is doing her coursework. She is also listening to a conversation happening 2 rooms away through a ventilation system she mapped when she was 9. She has been listening to the same man for 6 weeks. Before we go deeper, tell me something. Do you think you could survive in a world where you had to rely only on what you hear? Because this is the story of Chisom Obi, the girl Lagos threw away, who didn't just survive inside one of the most dangerous empires in Seoul. She became something they never planned for, something they can't control. This is Afro Soul Stories. Part 2 begins now. Stay with me. His name is Lee Hyun-chul. He has worked in this compound for 4 years. Groundskeeper, driver rotation, general staff. Invisible. Forgettable. Exactly the kind of man Nam Do-han would have chosen as his eyes inside these walls. He makes excellent tea. He is unfailingly polite. He has a wife, 2 children, and a gambling debt he thinks no one knows about. Chisom knows about it. She exposed him 6 weeks ago, told Mujin his voice, his history, the exact meeting room he had used as Nam Do-han's contact inside the compound. That part was finished. What was not finished was the question she had not stopped asking since the night she came home from the warehouse. Nam Do-han was gone. His organization was dismantled. His funding was frozen. So who was Lee Hyun-chul still reporting to? Because he was still reporting to someone. She was certain of it. 3 weeks after Nam Do-han's fall, his breathing changed again. A different quality this time. Not the stress of a man maintaining a secret. The relief of a man who had found a new arrangement. Someone had picked up the line. She was going to find out who. Mujin did not like being summoned to the garden. It was February, it was cold, and Chisom was sitting on the stone bench by the koi ponds like she couldn't feel the winds cutting through the compound walls, her face turned toward the water with the particular stillness that meant she was thinking about something she wasn't ready to say out loud. He had known her for 12 years. He knew this stillness. He sat down beside her. The bench was freezing. He did not mention it because he had learned that complaining about temperature around Chisom resulted in her describing in precise detail the difference between cold you could escape and cold you couldn't, and he did not have time for that lecture today. Lee Hyun-chul, she said. No preamble, no greeting, just the name dropped into the air like a stone into the pond. Mujin was quiet for a moment. Still watching him? Someone new has picked up his line. Based on what? 3 weeks after Nam Do-han's fall, his breathing changed again. Different quality, not the stress of a man maintaining a secret. Relief, the specific relief of a man who had found a new arrangement. She tilted her head slightly. Nam Do-han is gone, but whoever trained him knew the value of what Hyun-chul had access to. They wouldn't let that connection die. A pause. Do you need more, or is that sufficient to begin looking? Mujin stared at the koi pond. A large orange fish surfaced, looked at him with a blank judgment that only fish could manage, and submerged again. How do you know about the debt? He takes public transit to Gangnam every second Thursday. I heard him discussing the route with his wife 4 months ago. He said it was for a financial advisor. 3 weeks later, I heard him on a call using the specific vocabulary of someone negotiating a payment extension. The amount was mentioned. He thought he was alone in the corridor. He was incorrect. She paused. He was incorrect. You want me to investigate. I want you to confirm. And I want to know who's paying him, because someone is paying him, and whoever it is knows enough about this compound to know that Lee Hyun-chul was vulnerable. She turned toward him. Not looking at him, she never looked at anyone, but facing him directly, the way she did when she wanted you to understand she was serious. This isn't random, Uncle Mujin. Someone studied us. He sat with that for a moment. The fish surfaced again. He ignored it. Does your father know? Not yet. Why? She was quiet. When she spoke, her voice was softer. Because if I'm wrong, I've accused a man with a family of betraying us based on his breathing patterns. And if I'm right, she stopped. If I'm right, Appa will handle it the way he handles things. And Lee Hyun-chul has 2 children, and I need to know what he's done before I decide what should happen to him. Mujin looked at her, 18 years old, raised inside a criminal empire, still trying to find the version of justice that let her sleep at night. You're getting soft, he said. I'm getting accurate, she said. There's a difference. He stood up. The bench had frozen the entire lower half of his body. He was going to be walking strangely for an hour. I'll look into it, quietly. Thank you, Uncle Mujin. He started walking, stopped, turned back. The fish, he said. Can you hear them? Of course. What do they sound like? She considered this. Disappointed, she said. They always sound disappointed. He left before she could see him smile. Not that she could see him smile, but she would hear it somehow. She always did. The investigation took 3 weeks. Mujin was careful. He didn't pull surveillance footage. That would leave a trail. He didn't question Lee Hyun-chul directly. That would spook him. Instead, he did what he did best. He watched, and he waited, and he let the man's own patterns betray him. Lee Hyun-chul made a call every Tuesday and Friday at 6:14 p.m. from a payphone 3 blocks from the compound. The timing was precise. The location was deliberate. Whoever was running him had given him a protocol, and he was following it with the discipline of a man who understood consequences. Mujin intercepted the call on the 3rd Friday. He didn't tap the line, too risky, too traceable. He simply stood close enough to hear Lee Hyun-chul's half of the conversation, pretending to read a newspaper in the adjacent storefront while his man recorded the ambient audio. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. Lee Hyun-chul mentioned 3 things: a shipment schedule, a meeting time, and a name. The name was not Nam Do-han. Nam Do-han was gone, dismantled, exiled, erased from the power structures that had once welcomed him. This was someone else, someone still inside the game, someone close enough to the Consortium to know what questions to ask. Mujin brought the recording to Chisom that night. She listened to it 3 times. The 4th time she stopped it halfway. Play it again, she said, from 2:47. He played it. Again. He played it. She sat very still. Her hands were flat on the table. Her face had the expression he had learned to recognize over 12 years, the expression that meant she had found something and was deciding whether to say it. There's a second voice, she said. Mujin frowned. I only hear Lee Hyun-chul. Not on the phone, in the background, behind him. They speak at 3:12, just 3 words, very low. I can't make out what they're saying, but I can hear the pattern. What pattern? The breathing, the rhythm between words. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. I've heard that rhythm before. Where? She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was different, flatter, the way she sounded when she was controlling something. Here, she said, in this compound, I've heard that person breathe in this house. The next week was a study in careful listening. Chisom moved through the compound differently. She still followed her routines: breakfast at 7:30, language study until noon, martial arts with Mujin in the afternoon, piano in the evening. But underneath the routine, she was hunting. She listened to every person in the building: staff, security, the rotating personnel who came and went with the day's business. She cataloged their breathing patterns, their footstep rhythms, the specific ways they moved through space. None of them matched. Maybe you're wrong, Mujin said on the 5th day. I'm not wrong. The recording quality was poor, background noise, interference. You might have heard something that wasn't. I'm not wrong, Uncle Mujin. Her voice was patient in the way that meant she was not patient at all. She have spent 12 years memorizing this household. I know every breath in this building. That voice is familiar. I just can't place it yet. He looked at her. What do you want to do? I want to listen to the next call. Lee Hyun-chol calls on Tuesdays and Fridays. Tomorrow is Tuesday. Then tomorrow, she said, I go with you. Moo-jin objected to this plan for approximately 7 minutes. Then he realized he was objecting to Chisom, which had never once worked in 12 years, and he adjusted his strategy to minimizing the risk rather than eliminating it. They set up in the storefront at 5:45 p.m. Chisom wore nondescript clothes, a coat, a hat pulled low, nothing that would draw attention. She kept her cane folded in her bag. To anyone watching, she was a young woman waiting for someone, looking at her phone like every other young woman in Seoul. She was not looking at her phone. She was listening to the street. At 6:12 p.m., she heard Lee Hyun-chol's footsteps. She had memorized them years ago. The slight hesitation on the left foot, a remnant of a childhood injury he'd mentioned once in the kitchen and never spoken of again. He walked past the storefront. She heard the payphone booth open, the dial tone. The call connected. She couldn't hear the other side, but she could hear Lee Hyun-chol's responses, the cadence of his voice, the pauses where the other person spoke. And at 3:08 into the call, she heard it. The second voice, in the background, low, almost imperceptible, speaking just 2 words this time. She knew immediately. Her face didn't change, her breathing didn't change. 12 years of practice meant that nothing external betrayed the earthquake that had just happened inside her chest. But she knew. She didn't tell Moo-jin in the car. She didn't tell him when they returned to the compound. She walked to her room, closed the door, and sat on her bed in the darkness. Not that darkness was different for her than light, and let herself feel the weight of what she had just learned. The voice belonged to Kwon Ji-yeon, compound staff, the woman who had worked in this compound for 6 years, the woman who had helped Chisom navigate the kitchen when she was 12, the woman who had made her soup when she was sick and sat with her when the nightmares about Lagos came and she couldn't sleep. Kwon Ji-yeon was the mole, not Lee Hyun-chol. Lee Hyun-chol was the instrument. Ji-yeon was the handler. Inside the house, listening, reporting, passing information to whoever was paying for it. Chisom had trusted her. She sat in the dark and let herself feel that, the specific pain of being betrayed by someone you had allowed close enough to hurt you. She had felt it once before, when she was 7 years old, standing in a marketplace while her uncle negotiated her price. She had thought she understood betrayal then. This was different. This was someone she had chosen to trust, not someone who was assigned to her by blood. This was a wound she had participated in creating. She allowed herself 10 minutes of this. Then she stood up, walked to the study, and knocked on her father's door. Baek Ejun listened without interrupting. This was one of the things Chisom had learned to appreciate about his father over 12 years. He understood that listening was not the same as waiting to speak. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You're certain," he said finally. It was not a question. "Yes." "Jian has been with us for 6 years. Mrs. O trusts her completely." "I know." "You trusted her." Chisom was quiet. "Yes," she said. "I did." He didn't respond to that. He heard him stand, heard the creak of the leather chair, heard his footsteps moving toward the window. "What do you want to do?" The question surprised her. Not the asking of it. Her father had always treated her as a participant in his decisions, not a spectator. This was weighty behind it. He was asking her to decide. "I want to know who she's working for," Chisom said slowly. "Lee Hyun-chol is debt-motivated. He'll turn for the right offer. But Jian," she paused. "Jian isn't doing this for money. Her finances are stable. Her pattern suggests ideology, not desperation. Someone convinced her that what she's doing is justified." Which consortium member has that kind of reach? I don't know yet, but I can find out. How? Chisom had thought about this. She had been thinking about it since the moment she identified the voice. The plan had arrived fully formed, the way her best plans always did, not created but discovered, like finding a shape that was already there. Jian thinks I trust her, Chisom said. She thinks I don't know. So I'm going to tell her something. Something that sounds like valuable information, something worth passing along. And then I'm going to listen to where it goes. Baek Ejun was quiet for a moment. You want to use yourself as bait. I want to use my blindness as bait, she corrected. Jian, like everyone else, underestimates what I hear. She thinks I'm limited. She thinks my intelligence is compensatory, a replacement for sight, not an addition to it. Chisom's voice was flat, controlled. I'm going to let her believe that a little longer. Her father turned from the window. She heard the movement, the rustle of fabric, the shift in air pressure. You're angry, he said. Yes. Good. His voice was quiet. In their world, his quiet voice was far more dangerous than his loud one. Anger is useful when it's aimed correctly. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Chisom let slip, in the kitchen while Jian was preparing afternoon tea, that her father was moving a significant shipment through Busan in 2 weeks. She mentioned the date, the time, the dock number. She mentioned that the security would be lighter than usual because the shipment was low priority. She mentioned all of this while seemingly distracted by her phone, her voice casual, as if she didn't realize how much she was revealing. Jian's breathing changed. Chisom heard it, the subtle quickening, the held breath that meant information was being stored. That sounds complicated, Jian said, her voice perfectly normal. Appa handles the complicated things, Chisom said. I just remember what he tells me. She heard Jian smile, the specific movement of facial muscles that changed the quality of someone's breath, a smile that thought it was unobserved. You're very good at remembering, Jian said. I have to be. What else can a blind girl do? The information moved within 48 hours. Mujin's contact in the Busan docks reported unusual inquiries. Someone was asking about security schedules, about dock assignments, about the specific date Chisom had mentioned. The inquiries traced back to a shell company. The shell company traced back to an investment firm. The investment firm traced back to a name. Chisom was in the study when Mujin delivered the report. She listened to him read it, the chain of ownership, the financial connections, the careful layering that was supposed to hide the person at the top. When he reached the name, he stopped. You're sure, Chisom said. I'm sure. The name was Kang Seohwa. Chisom was very still. The room was very quiet. Kang Seohwa, the woman who had pursued Baek Ejun for 2 years, the woman who had left doors swinging in Chisom's path, the woman who looked at a blind child and seen an obstacle to be removed. She had been gone for 4 years. Chisom thought she was finished. She had been wrong. She's patient, Chisom quieted. I underestimated that. She's also well-funded, Mujin said. The investment firm has connections to 3 consortium members. This isn't personal revenge. She's built a network. Why? Because she cost you something. Not your father, you. She was in a position to become his wife, to inherit everything he built, and then a 7-year-old girl from Lagos took that from her. Chisom absorbed this. So she's been waiting 4 years, building connections, finding weak points. Yes. And now? Now she knows the Busan shipment is compromised. She'll move against it, and when she does, we'll have evidence, actionable evidence, enough to bring to the consortium. Mujin nodded. Then he remembered she couldn't see him nod. 12 years, and he still forgot. Yes, he said, enough to end her. Jian was removed quietly. Chisom insisted on that. Not violence, not the way her father usually handled betrayal. Jian had 2 sisters, a mother who was ill. Chisom did not want them to suffer for Jian's choices. "You're getting soft," Mujin said again. "I'm getting precise. There's a difference." Jian was given a choice: leave Seoul permanently and her family would be unharmed, stay and face consequences. She left within a week. Lee Hyung-chul was given a similar choice. His gambling debts were paid by Baek Ejun's organization, which now owned them. He would work for them now, feeding misinformation to whoever came asking. His children would never know. The Busan shipment went ahead as scheduled, but the cargo was different, and the security was not lighter at all. When Selhawa's people arrived, they found nothing valuable and walked into a trap that cost her 3 of her best assets. She had made her move. She had failed, and now she knew that someone had been watching her the entire time. The Consortium meeting was in 2 weeks. Chisom was ready. She sat at the piano, but she didn't play. Her hands rested on the keys. The room was quiet, the specific quiet of late evening, when the compound settled into its nighttime rhythms and the only sounds were distant and domestic. She heard her father's footsteps in the hallway, heard him pause at the door. "You found her," he said. "I found her." He entered, sat in the chair by the window, the chair he always sat in when he came to this room, the chair his wife had placed there 20 years ago. "Are you satisfied?" Chisom considered the question. "Satisfied isn't the right word," she said finally. "I thought I knew who was inside these walls. I thought I had cataloged everyone, and I missed her. For 6 years, I missed her." Jian was careful. "Jian was careful because she knew what I could do," Chisom said. "She adjusted her patterns around me. She made herself invisible to my methods." She paused. "That's what bothers me. Not that she betrayed us, that she knew how to hide from me specifically." Baek Ejun was quiet for a moment. "What does that tell you?" "That I need to be more than what people expect." She placed one finger on a key, middle C, and pressed it. The note hung in the air. "They're starting to account for me. They're starting to plan around me, which means I need to become something they haven't planned for yet." The note faded. "You sound like a strategist," he said. "I sound like your daughter." He laughed. It was rare enough that she filed the sound away, added it to her collection of things to remember. "Yes," he said, "you do." She played the lullaby, slowly this time. Not the full melody, just the opening phrase, repeated 3 times, like a question she was asking herself. "How do you know when someone you trust has stopped being trustworthy?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was softer. "You listen to what they don't say." She smiled. The same answer she had given Mujin in the garden reflected back to her. "I'm going to deal with Selhawa, personally, at the Consortium." "I know. You're not going to stop me?" "Would it work?" She considered this. "No." "Then no," he said. "I'm not going to stop you." She played the final phrase of the lullaby. Let it settle into the silence of the womb. "I love you, Appa," she said. "I know. I can hear it." She laughed. The sound surprised her. She hadn't expected it, but it came anyway, filling the room the way sunlight fills water. "That's my line," she said. "I'm learning, slowly, but I'm learning." She finished the lullaby. The last note faded into silence, and then her father said something that made her hands freeze on the keys. "There's something else," he said. "Something Mujin found in the documents we recovered from Selhawa's operation." Chisom turned toward him. "What?" "Silence. The kind of silence that changes everything." "Someone who's been inside this compound," he said. "Someone who's been inside this compound longer than Jian. Someone who knows us better than anyone outside this family should." Chisom's chest went tight. "Who, Appa?" "We have a designation, a code name, not an identity, but Mujin is tracing it. They've been watching us for years, and Selhawa was just one of their assets. There's something bigger here, something we are going to find." Chisom sat very still. The room was very quiet. She had thought the mole was the threat. She had thought finding Jian was the end. She had been wrong. The real threat was still out there, still watching, still waiting, and she was going to find them. Picture this. A private room in a building that does not officially exist. 7 men at a table. The youngest is 53, the oldest is 71. Between them, they control shipping routes, construction empires, entertainment conglomerates, and the kind of political influence that never makes headlines because it doesn't need to. They are the Consortium, the invisible architecture of power that runs beneath the surface of this country like a second skeleton. And they are talking about a girl. She dismantled Nam Do-won, says the man at the head of the table. His name is Park Chun-sik. He is 67 years old. He has not raised his voice in 30 years because he hasn't needed to. She held her inside a warehouse for 2 days. She mapped the building, turned a guard, escaped in the dark, and walked out with everything she needed to destroy a man who had been building power for 2 decades. Silence. She is 19 years old, Park Chun-sik continues. She has been blind since birth, and she is more dangerous than anyone we've faced in the last 10 years. The man to his left shifts in his chair. Younger, by Consortium standards, mid-50s, sharp-faced, the kind of man who measures every word against its potential return. His name is Hwang Jin-woo, and he runs the Eastern Port operations. She's a child, Hwang says. Talented, perhaps, lucky, certainly, but Baek Ejun is the real threat, not his... His what? Park Chun-sik's voice is soft, dangerously soft. His daughter? His asset? What do you call a weapon that can think? Hwang doesn't answer. She knows things, Park continues. She has been inside that compound for 12 years, listening to every conversation, every negotiation, every name that passes through those walls. She has a memory that borders on the pathological. And now, thanks to the incident with King Selhwa, she knows we've been watching her. Selhwa failed, says another man, older, voice like gravel. Her operation was compromised. Her operation was anticipated, Park corrects. There's a difference. The girl didn't react to Selhwa. She predicted her. She laid a trap using false information and waited for Selhwa to walk into it. She pauses. That's not luck. That's chess. And she's playing it better than most of us. The room is quiet. So, what do you propose? Hwang asks. Park Chun-sik considers this. His fingers tap the table. 3 taps, a pause, 3 taps. A thinking rhythm he's had since childhood. We have 2 options. We remove her, or we recruit her. Remove her how? Baek Ejun would burn this consortium to the ground if we touched her. I didn't say it would be easy. Park's eyes move around the table. The question is, which threat is greater? A blind girl who knows too much, or the war we'd start by eliminating her? Silence. The kind of silence that calculates. There's a third option, says the oldest man at the table. His name is Moon Kang-ho. He rarely speaks. When he does, people listen. We do nothing. We watch, and we let her make the first mistake. Park shakes his head. She doesn't make mistakes, that's the problem. Moon smiles. It's not a warm smile. Everyone makes mistakes, Chun-sik. The question is whether you're patient enough to wait for them. 8 months had passed since Selhwa's operation had been dismantled. Chisom noticed the silence first. It started slowly, the way rain stops before you realize it stopped. A phone call that wasn't returned, a meeting that was rescheduled, a business partner who had visited every month for 3 years, suddenly too busy to visit. She mentioned it to Moojin in training. He deflected. People are busy, he said. It's the season. It's February, Uncle Moojin. What season are you referring to? He threw a strike. She blocked it. The busy season, he said. He caught his wrist on the next strike, redirected his momentum, and put him on the mat in a movement so fluid it looked choreographed. You're lying, she said. Your breathing changes when you lie. It's been doing it for 3 days. What aren't you telling me? He lay on the mat, looking up at the ceiling. He was 52 years old. He had been a fighter his entire adult life, and he had just been put on the ground by a blind teenager who weighed 54 kilograms. The Consortium, he said. What about them? He sat up. His joints protested.
He sat up. His joints protested. They're applying pressure, economic, social. Partners are being encouraged to reconsider their relationships with your father. Chisom was quiet for a moment. She walked to the edge of the mat, picked up her water bottle, drank. "Because of me," she said. "Because of what you did to Namdawan, because of what you did to Selhwa, because they're realizing you're not a liability they can use against your father. You're a weapon they don't control." He stood, slowly. "They're afraid of you. Powerful men don't like being afraid."
What does Appa say? He says it will pass, that they'll overextend, make a mistake, and he'll respond. The usual. And you? Mujin was quiet for a moment. I think they're not going to overextend. I think they're going to keep the pressure steady and let your father's position erode slowly, like water on stone. By the time it's visible, the damage will be done. Chisom set down the water bottle. Her face was calm, the practiced calm of someone who had learned very young that external emotion was a vulnerability. "Then we don't wait for them to overextend," she said. "We go to them directly. Your father won't allow—" "I'm not asking my father." The request came through formal channels. A Consortium member, Park Chun-sik himself, wished to meet with Baek Ejun's daughter. Not Baek Ejun, his daughter, specifically, privately. The audacity of it was breathtaking. In their world, a direct approach to someone's family was either an overture or a threat, and often both. Baek Ejun refused. Chisom overrode him. This was not something she had done before. In 12 years, she had learned her father's world by observation, by listening, by careful accumulation of knowledge she never acted on directly. She had stayed in the background, a shadow behind the throne. Now she stepped forward. "If they want to see what I am," she said, standing in her father's study, her voice level, her posture certain, "let them see." Baek Ejun looked at her. She couldn't see his expression, but she could hear his breathing, the slight elevation that meant he was controlling his reaction. "You understand what you're doing," he said. It was not a question. "Yes. You understand that once you step into that room, you cannot step back out? They will remember. They will factor you into every calculation from now until one of you is no longer a consideration." "I understand." Silence. Long. The kind of silence between two people who understand each other well enough that words are often unnecessary. "Why?" he asked, finally. Chisom had thought about this. She had been thinking about it since Mujin told her about the pressure campaign. The answer arrived the way her best answers did. Not created, but discovered, like finding something that had been there all along. "Because they think I'm your weakness," she said. "They think my blindness makes me limited. They think I'm an asset to be protected, not a threat to be confronted. And as long as they think that, they'll keep applying pressure through you, hoping you'll make a mistake trying to shield me." She paused. "I need them to understand that I'm not a shield. I'm a weapon, and I don't need protecting." Baek Ejun was quiet for a long moment. "You sound like your father. I sound like your daughter. There's a difference." He laughed. The second time this month, she was keeping count. "Yes," he said, "there is." The restaurant was chosen for its discretion. Private rooms, sound-dampened walls, a waiting list measured in years, unless you're the kind of person who didn't wait for anything. Park Chan-sik was that kind of person. So was Baek Ejun, and now, apparently, so was his daughter. Chisom entered alone. This was her condition. No security, no Mujin, no one to suggest that she needed protection. Just her cane, and 12 years of preparation for a moment she hadn't known was coming. The room was smaller than she expected. She mapped it in 3 seconds. 8 meters by 6, rectangular, One large table in the center, two chairs positioned across from each other. Park Chun-sik was already seated. She could hear his breathing, measured, controlled, the breathing of a man who had spent decades never revealing more than he intended. She heard one other thing, a faint electronic hum, high frequency, barely perceptible, coming from somewhere on his person, a pocket perhaps, or the lining of his jacket. He was transmitting. Someone else was listening to this conversation. She filed this information and did not react. Miss Obi, his voice was cultured, precise, the voice of old money and older power. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Mr. Park. I walked to the chair and sat. She did not fumble, she did not hesitate. She had memorized the room's dimensions from the sound of his voice's reflection and placed her cane across her knees with the casual ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times. I was curious. About what? About what kind of man requests a private meeting with a 19-year-old girl. The options are limited, and most of them reflect poorly on the man. Silence. She could hear his breathing change, a slight catch quickly controlled. She had surprised him. I assure you, my interests are entirely professional. I'm sure they are. Professional intimidation, professional assessment, professional calculation of whether I'm a threat worth addressing or an asset worth acquiring. You tilt your head slightly. Which is it, Mr. Park? I'd like to save us both some time. Another silence, longer. She could almost hear him recalibrating. You're direct. I'm blind. I have limited patience for performances I can't see. He laughed. It was a genuine laugh. She could hear it in the texture, the lack of control. She had surprised him again.
Very well, he said. I'll be direct as well. You concern us, Miss Obi, the Consortium. You've demonstrated capabilities that we did not anticipate from someone in your position. My position being blind? Your position being young, female, foreign. He paused. And yes, blind, though I'm beginning to think that last one is less of a limitation than we assumed. It's not a limitation at all, she said. It's a perspective. I perceive things differently than you do. That's not the same as perceiving less. She felt him studying her. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it, the weight of attention from someone accustomed to measuring people like quantities on a ledger. What do you want, Miss Obi? What do I want? Nothing you're able to give me, Mr. Park. I already have a family. I have a home. I have a purpose. What I want is for you to stop trying to erode my father's position because you're afraid of what I might become. And if we can't accommodate that, she smiled, then we have a problem. The next 20 minutes were a chess match. Park Chun-sik probed. Chisom deflected. He offered veiled threats wrapped in reasonable language. She unwrapped them, examined them, and handed them back stripped of their power. He was good. She had expected that. You didn't reach his position without being exceptional. But he was operating from a set of assumptions about her. Assumptions shaped by her age, her blindness, her apparent dependence on her father, and those assumptions kept leading him down paths that didn't connect to reality. She waited until minute 17. Then she said, casually, as if mentioning the weather, "You have someone listening to this conversation." He went very still. She heard it, the sudden absence of movement. "I'm sorry?" "The transmission device. It's in your left jacket pocket. High-frequency signal. You've had it on since before I entered the room." She tilted her head. "The audio quality is probably excellent. Your listener is getting every word." Silence. Absolute silence. "How?" "I'm blind, Mr. Park. I hear things that sighted people don't notice, including the specific electronic hum of a covert recording device." She leaned forward slightly. "Which means I've spent the last 17 minutes performing for your audience. I wonder who they are. Another consortium member? Someone who didn't want to be seen attending this meeting.
Someone who wanted to evaluate me from a safe distance. She waited. Let the silence build. Here's what I want you to tell them, she said. I know you're watching me. I've known since I was 15. I've been listening to your people talk about me in rooms they thought were private, in conversations they assumed I couldn't hear, in languages they believed I didn't speak. She paused. I have spent 12 years in a compound full of secrets. I know things, not just about my father's operations, about yours, about the shipping routes your Eastern Division uses to avoid customs, about the political donations your Entertainment Division makes through 17 shell companies, about the specific arrangement you have with the Port Authority in Busan that bypasses 3 levels of inspection. She let that land. I have never used any of this information. I have never threatened anyone with it. I have no interest in becoming your enemy, Mr. Park. But if you continue to apply pressure to my father's position, if you continue to treat me as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected, I will become very interested, and I think we both know that you would not enjoy my full attention. She stood, picked up her cane. Thank you for dinner. I hope we won't need to meet again, but if we do, perhaps you could choose a restaurant with better ventilation. The fish was excellent, but the kitchen exhaust was working too hard. It suggests a maintenance issue. She walked out without waiting for a response. In the car on the way home, she allowed herself a small smile. She had been terrified the entire time. Her heart rate had been elevated from the moment she entered the room. Her palms had been damp against the handle of her cane. But she had not let any of it show, and Park Chun-sik would never know. The Consortium did not meet again for 3 weeks. When they did, the conversation was different. Chisom did not hear this directly. The Consortium's private spaces were beyond even her reach, but she heard the results. Phone calls that started returning, meetings that were no longer postponed, a business partner who had been too busy suddenly finding time in his schedule. The pressure was easing. Mujin reported what he'd learned through his channels. The consortium was divided. Half of them, led by Moon Kang-ho, believed Chisom should be left alone. The other half, led by Hwang Jin-woo, believed she should be eliminated before she became too powerful to contain. They're deadlocked, Mujin said. Neither side has enough support to act, so they're doing nothing. Chisom considered this. Who's leading the elimination faction? Hwang Jin-woo, Eastern Ports, ambitious. He sees your father's position as an opportunity. If Baek Ejun falls, Hwang takes his territory. And he sees me as the key to making that happen? He sees you as a tool, something that can be used to provoke your father into making a mistake. She was quiet for a moment. And the other faction? Moon Kang-ho, the oldest member. He's not protecting you out of kindness. He's protecting you because he doesn't want a war. He thinks the consortium is better served by stability than by conflict. A pragmatist. A survivor. He's been in the consortium longer than anyone. He's seen what happens when they overreach. Chisom nodded slowly. So Hwang is the danger. Hwang is the immediate danger, but he's not acting alone. Someone is backing him, someone with resources outside the consortium's usual channels. Selhwa? Possibly. We're still tracing the money. She stood, walked to the window, felt the afternoon sun on her face. She couldn't see it, but she could feel its warmth mapping the time of day through sensation rather than sight. Keep tracing, she said, and let me know the moment Hwang makes a move. You're expecting one? A man who wants power doesn't stay deadlocked forever. He'll find a way to break the stalemate. She paused. I'd like to be ready when he does. The call came 3 days later. Chisom was in her room, finishing a language lesson in Mandarin, when Mujin appeared in the doorway. He heard his footsteps stop, heard his breathing, faster than usual, heard the quality of his silence. What happened? He paused. A call came through, from Lagos. He says a man says he's your uncle. He says he knows where you are now, and he wants to talk. Chisom went very still. The room went very quiet. For a long moment, she didn't move. She was remembering, the way she always remembered, in perfect detail, a marketplace in Lagos, a blue birthday dress, the sound of her uncle's voice negotiating her price. She was 7 years old. She was 19 now, and the man who had sold her had found her again. Picture this. A bar in Lagos, the kind of bar that caters to men who have run out of better options. Dim lighting, cheap beer, a television mounted in the corner playing news from a country that stopped caring about them years ago. In a booth near the back, a man is watching the television. He is 53 years old. He looks older. Life has not been kind to him, but then he has not been kind to life either, and these things have a way of balancing. His name is Emeka Obi. On the television, a charity gala is broadcast from Seoul. Politicians, businessmen, the kind of people who attend events specifically so they can be photographed attending them. The camera pans across the room. It catches a face. The man leans forward. He knows that face. He knows it even though he has not seen it in 12 years, even though the girl it belongs to is now a woman, even though everything about her has changed except the one thing that makes her recognizable. She is blind. She is standing next to one of the most powerful men in South Korea. She is wearing the kind of dress that costs more than Emeka has made in the last 5 years. And she is the girl he sold in a marketplace when she was 7 years old. His expression shifts. Not guilt. Guilt has never been one of Emeka's burdens. Calculation. The specific calculation of a man who has finally found something he can use. He orders another drink. He asks the bartender if there's a way to make international calls. Chisom did not sleep the night she learned her uncle had found her. She lay in bed and listened to the compound settling into its nighttime rhythms, the distant movement of security patrols, the hum of the heating system, the specific creaks of a building she had memorized so completely it was more familiar than her own body. She listened, and she thought, and she felt the weight of her past arriving uninvited at her door. She had spent 12 years building a life that did not include Emeka Obi. She had studied, she had trained, she had learned languages and cultivated skills and made herself into something valuable, something powerful, something that could never be sold again. And now a man who had sold her niece for less than the price of transport fare was demanding payment. She got up at 4 a.m. She walked to the kitchen in the dark, not because she needed light, but because she wanted silence. She made tea. She sat at the table where she had accidentally called Baek Ejun Appa for the first time, and she let herself feel everything she had not permitted herself to feel in 12 years. Rage. The kind of rage that starts in the chest and spreads outward, that makes your hands shake and your breath short. She had felt it once before, in the marketplace, standing in her blue birthday dress while her uncle negotiated. She had pushed it down then because she was 7 and survival required stillness. She pushed it down now for different reasons, because rage was useful but only when aimed, and she was not yet certain where to aim. Emeka's demands arrived by email. This was almost funny. The man who had sold his niece in a physical marketplace, making his threats through digital channels. Progress. He wanted 500 million won, approximately 400,000 USD. He wanted it transferred within 30 days. He wanted no contact from Baek Ejun's organization, no surveillance, no consequences. He wanted to be paid and forgotten. In exchange, he would not release the story to the press. He would not provide details of Chisom's origin to the investigative journalists who had already started asking questions. He would disappear, and the adoption that had never been legal would remain private. Chisom read the email 3 times. The text-to-speech software made it clinical, impersonal, just words in a mechanical voice. But she could hear him underneath it, the specific phrasing, the careful construction of someone who thought he was being clever.
He was not clever. He had never been clever. He was merely desperate and opportunistic, and he had finally found something he believed was worth something. She called Mujin. "My father's response?" she asked. "He wants to handle it directly." What does directly mean? Silence. The kind of silence that meant Mujin didn't want to say it out loud. "No," she said, "not that. Not him. Mujin. He's a coward. He's not worth killing, and his family doesn't deserve to lose him even if he deserves to be lost." She stood, walked to the window. "I want to handle this myself. Your father won't. My father will respect my decision, because this isn't his past, it's mine." A long pause. "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to go to Lagos," she said. "I'm planning to meet my uncle face to face, and I'm planning to show him what he threw away." The flight was 14 hours. Chisom spent most of it working, language practice, security briefings, the endless documentation that came with managing her father's legitimate business interests. But in the last hour, she stopped. She listened to the plane, the engines, the air circulation, the quiet breathing of the security personnel Mujin had insisted on sending with her, and she thought about what she was returning to. Lagos, the city that made her and broke her, the place where her parents were buried, where her childhood had ended, where she had learned that the people who were supposed to protect you were sometimes the people who hurt you most. She had not been back since the marketplace. 12 years. She wondered if it would feel different, if the sounds would be familiar or foreign, if her body would remember things her mind had tried to forget. Lagos was an assault, not hostile, overwhelming. The sounds were everywhere, layered in ways that Seoul's ordered streets never were. Traffic and voices and music and the specific rhythm of a city that ran on its own clock, that did not wait for anyone to be ready.
Chisom stood on the tarmac and breathed it in. Different. It was so different from what she remembered. The hot air was the same, heavy, humid, carrying the smell of exhaust and pepper and the specific sweetness of tropical fruit. But everything else had shifted, or maybe she had shifted. Maybe the city was exactly as she left it, and she was the one who had changed. She rebuilt her mental map in real time. Her security team, 2 men who had worked for her father for years, both fluent in Nigerian pidgin and English, flanked her without crowding. They had been briefed. She didn't want assistance unless she asked for it. She would navigate herself. She would arrive where she intended to arrive. The car took her to the hotel, a new construction, modern, nothing like the Lagos she remembered. Her room was on the 15th floor. She walked the space 3 times, mapping the furniture, the windows, the bathroom. She ordered food she didn't eat. Then she called Emeka. He answered on the 3rd ring. "I didn't think you'd call," he said. His voice was older, rougher, but still recognizable, still the voice she heard in her nightmares sometimes, negotiating her price like she was inventory. "I didn't think you'd have the courage to blackmail me," she said, "but here we are." Silence. He hadn't expected her directness. "I want to meet," she said, "tomorrow, in person." "Why?" "Because I want to look at you." He laughed. It was an ugly sound. "You can't look at anything, child. You're blind." "I can look at things in my own way. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the Grand Hotel on Victoria Island. Come alone." "And if you don't?" "Then I pay you nothing and you release whatever story you think will hurt me, and then we see what happens." She hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the desk and breathed, slowly, deliberately, until the shaking stopped. Tomorrow. She would face him tomorrow. He arrived late. Of course he did. Chisom heard him enter the hotel lobby. His footsteps were heavier than she remembered. 12 years of aging, of drinking, of choices that had worn him down. He walked with a slight unevenness, favoring his right side. An injury, maybe, or just the erosion of time. She was seated in a private meeting room, neutral ground. Her security team was outside the door, close enough to respond, far enough to give her privacy. The door opened. He entered. She heard him stop. "You look different," he said. "You sound the same," she said. He sat across from her. She heard the chair scrape, heard his breathing, elevated, nervous. He was afraid of her. Good. He should be. "You expected Baek Ejun, or his people. You got me. Why?" "Because this is between us. It's always been between us." She leaned forward slightly. "You sold me, Uncle Emeka. You took me to that marketplace in my blue birthday dress, and you sold me like I was cargo. I was 7 years old." Silence. "He had debts," he said. His voice was defensive, explanatory, the voice of someone who had rehearsed justifications for 12 years. "Your parents left nothing. The house was worth less than they owed. I took you in when no one else would. You took the house. You sold the contents. You kept me in a room in Mushin and fed me table scraps while you drank what was left of my parents' savings." Her voice was flat, controlled. "I heard you on the phone, planning it. I was 6 years old, and I heard you call me useless, but still eating." He didn't respond. "I remember everything," she said. "I remember the dress I was wearing. I remember the smell of the marketplace. I remember the specific phrase you used when they asked about my eyes. Defective goods, but useful for certain purposes." She paused. "I have spent 12 years remembering. I will spend the rest of my life remembering. You cannot threaten me with a story I have already lived." Silence. Long. Heavy. "What do you want?" he asked, finally. She considered the question. "I want you to understand what you did. Not because I expect you to feel guilt. Men like you don't feel guilt, only inconvenience. I want you to understand because I need you to know that I survived, that I thrived, that the girl you threw away became something more valuable than you will ever be." She reached into her bag, removed an envelope, placed it on the table between them. "There's money in there. Enough to clear your debts and relocate somewhere comfortable. Take it. Disappear. Never speak my name again." She paused. "This is not a negotiation. This is a gift, and it's the last thing I will ever give you." He reached for the envelope. "You should know something," she said. "I forgave you years ago. That's not why I came." He stopped. "Then why?" "I came so you would know that I remember, and that I won, and that you will carry that for whatever time you have left." She stood, picked up her cane. "Goodbye, Uncle Emeka." She walked out without waiting for a response. In the car to the airport, she allowed herself to feel. Not rage, not anymore. Something quieter. Something like grief, but not quite. Grief for the child she had been, standing in a marketplace with nothing left but a song. Grief for the parents she had lost, who had loved her completely and left too soon. Grief for the 12 years of silence she had carried, not speaking about Lagos, not thinking about Lagos, pretending the marketplace was something that had happened to someone else. It had happened to her, all of it, and now it was finished. She was in the terminal, preparing to board, when her phone buzzed. A blocked number, a voice she didn't recognize, Korean accent, older, female. "You are Neka Obi's daughter." Chisom stopped walking. "Who is this?" "I knew your mother, at the hospital, before you were born. We became friends, the way people become friends when they're both afraid." Chisom's hand tightened on the phone. "I need to speak with you, before it's too late. There are things you don't know about how you came to be where you are. Things about the song, things about why Baek Ejun found you in that marketplace." The line went silent. Chisom stood in the middle of a crowded terminal, bodies moving around her, voices overlapping, the chaos of departure and arrival, but she heard none of it. She was thinking about a lullaby,
a Korean song her Nigerian mother had sung every night, a song that had stopped a man in a Lagos marketplace, a song that had led her to Seoul, to her father, to everything. It had never been coincidence. Someone had been waiting for her all along. Picture this: an apartment in Busan, small, neat, filled with the particular kind of silence that belongs to people who live alone and have done so for a long time. There are photographs on the walls, old photographs, fading in their frames. A woman in her 20s holding a baby that never was born. A family portrait from a time when there was still family to photograph. In the main room, a woman is sitting by the window. Her name is Park Mire. Her hands shake slightly. Parkinson's, early stage. Her eyes are clear, but tired. The eyes of someone who has waited for a long time and is running out of time to wait. She is holding a photograph. The photograph shows two women, one Korean, one Nigerian, both young, both pregnant, both smiling with the specific brightness of people who do not yet know what is coming. She has looked at this photograph every day for 19 years. Today, finally, she will give it away. Park Soo-jin had been investigating Baek Ejun for 2 years. This was not unusual. Investigative journalists often spent years on a single story, especially when the subject was someone with the resources to make investigation difficult. Baek Ejun had those resources. His lawyers sent cease and desist letters like holiday cards. His security protocols were military grade. His public image was carefully maintained. Philanthropist, businessman, patron of the arts. But Soo-jin had found the cracks.
The Lagos connection. The 2012 trip that didn't appear on any official record, the emergency documentation for a child that had been processed in 24 hours, faster than any legal adoption, faster than any legitimate paperwork. She had found the name Nneka Obi. She had found the hospital records, Nigerian hospital, complications during delivery, a baby born blind. She had found the date and the ward and the other patients who had been there at the same time. And she had found Park Mire, the sister of Baek Ejun's deceased wife, the woman who had been in that same hospital, on that same ward, on the same day, losing her own child while Nneka Obi's was being born. 2 women, 2 tragedies, and somehow 12 years later, one of them was connected to a Korean crime lord and the other was dead, and her daughter was living in Seoul like she belonged there. Soo-jin knew a story when she saw one. She just needed someone to tell it. The approach came through formal channels. A request for an interview, a journalist from a major publication claiming to be working on a piece about adoption and international family building. Very professional, very careful, not mentioning Baek Ejun or anything connected to him. Chisom agreed to meet. This surprised Moo-jin, who had recommended refusing. It surprised her father, who had recommended ignoring. It surprised everyone who knew her, because Chisom did not engage with the press, did not make public appearances, did not exist in any official capacity as anyone other than a student at Yonsei University with excellent grades and a notable talent for languages. But Chisom had her reasons. The phone call at the airport, the woman who knew her mother, the suggestion that there were things she didn't know about her own story. She needed information, and sometimes the fastest way to get information was to let someone who wanted it come to you. They met at a coffee shop, neutral ground, public enough that Soo-jin would feel safe, private enough that they could speak freely. Chisom arrived early. She mapped the space, the tables, the counter, the entrances and exits. She identified the ambient sound level, the number of people present, the specific placement of their table relative to the other patrons. Soo-jin arrived exactly on time.
Her footsteps were confident, precise, a woman who moved through the world expecting it to accommodate her. "Miss Obi," she said, sitting down, "thank you for agreeing to meet." "Miss Park," Chisom tilted her head slightly, "you're recording this conversation." Silence. A pause that was almost imperceptible. "What makes you say that?" "Your bag. There's a device inside, I can hear the mechanism, and your breathing changes every time one of us says something significant. You're timing your breaths to the recording." She smiled slightly. "It's subtle. Most people wouldn't notice, but I'm not most people." Sujin was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her bag and turned off the recorder. "Fair enough," she said. "I should have expected that." "You should have," Chisom agreed, "but that's not why I'm here. You're not interested in adoption stories. You're investigating my father." "I'm investigating the truth." "The truth about what?" Sujin leaned forward. "The truth about how a blind Nigerian girl ended up living with one of the most powerful men in South Korea. The truth about what happened in Lagos in 2012. The truth about the connection between your mother and Baek Ejun's late wife." Chisom went very still. "What connection?" Sujin reached into her bag again. This time she removed a folder, papers, photographs, documentation. She placed it on the table between them. "She found hospital records from the facility where you were born. Your mother, Neka Obi, was there for 3 weeks before your delivery. Complications. She was alone most of the time. Your father visited when he could, but he was working. There was another woman on the ward, a Korean woman, also pregnant, also experiencing complications." Chisom didn't move. "Her name was Park Mire. She was there visiting family in Lagos. She went into premature labor and couldn't fly home. She and your mother, 2 women, alone, afraid, they became friends. The kind of friends you make when you're both facing something terrifying and need someone to hold on to." Sujin paused.
Park Mire lost her baby. She went back to Korea. Your mother recovered. You were born healthy. And at some point during those 3 weeks, Nkeka Obi learned a Korean lullaby, a family song, the same song she sang to you every night of your life. Chisom's hands were flat on the table, pressing down, grounding herself. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Park Mire is alive. She lives in Busan. She's ill, Parkinson's, but she's lucid, and she's been trying to find you for years." Sujin pushed the folder closer. "She wants to talk to you. She has things she wants you to know. About your mother. About the song. About why Baek Ejun found you in that marketplace." Chisom was quiet for a long time. The coffee shop moved around her. Voices, footsteps, the hiss of espresso machines. But she heard none of it. She was somewhere else entirely. She was in a marketplace in Lagos, singing a song she didn't understand, while a man who shouldn't have been there stopped in his tracks. She was beginning to understand something that had been true her entire life, waiting to be discovered. "What do you want in exchange?" she asked finally. Sujin considered this. "I want the story, eventually, when you're ready to tell it. Not my father's business. Your story, the adoption, the lullaby, the woman who learned a song from a stranger and taught it to her daughter." Sujin paused. "It's a good story, a human story. It doesn't need to involve anything else." Chisom considered. "Give me the folder and give me Park Mire's address. I'll decide about the story later." Sujin nodded. "Fair enough." She stood to leave, then stopped. "One more thing," she said. "Park Mire was Baek Ejun's wife's sister, his late wife, the one who died 4 years before he found you." Chisom's breath caught. "I thought you should know that," Sujin said, "before you meet her." She left. Chisom sat at the table for a long time, holding a folder full of her own history. The train to Busan took 2.5 hours. She spent most of it in silence, listening to the movement of the train, the conversations of other passengers, the changing quality of sound as they moved through tunnels and across bridges. She had traveled this route before, always on business, always with purpose. This was different. This was personal in a way that nothing had been personal in years. She had not told her father where she was going. This was deliberate. She needed to do this alone. She needed to meet Park Mire without the weight of Baek Ejun's presence, without the history of his marriage, and his grief, and his complicated silence about the sister-in-law he hadn't spoken to in 16 years. She needed to understand her own story first. The apartment was in an older building near the water. Chisom could hear the harbor from the street, ships and gulls, and the constant low rumble of a working port. She found the door, knocked. Footsteps inside. Slow, careful, the footsteps of someone who moved deliberately because their body no longer moved easily. The door opened. "You look like her," said a voice. Older, thin, the voice of someone who had been waiting a long time. "I could tell even before I saw your face. You moved the way she moved, confident, certain." Chisom was quiet for a moment. "I can't see you, but I can hear you, and you sound like someone who has been waiting for me." Park Mire laughed. It was a gentle sound, a little sad. 12 years, she said. "Come in, child. There's so much to tell you." The apartment smelled of tea and old paper and something floral, jasmine maybe, or lily. Chisom moved through it carefully, mapping the space. Small rooms, low ceilings, the compressed quality of someone who had spent decades fitting their life into limited space. Park Mire guided her to a chair, then sat across from her, close enough that Chisom could hear the slight tremor in her hands when she lifted her teacup. "Your mother," Park Mire said, "was the bravest woman I ever met." Chisom didn't respond. She waited. "We met in the hospital, both of us alone, both of us terrified. I was having complications, my baby was coming too early, and the doctors weren't certain either of us would survive. Your mother was having her own difficulties. She had been there for weeks already." Park Mire paused, sipped her tea. The cup rattled slightly against the saucer. "We started talking because we were both crying at 3 a.m, and there was no one else to talk to. We kept talking because sometimes you meet someone and you know immediately that they understand things about you that other people don't." She paused. "She told me about you, before you were born. She told me you would be different, special. She said she'd had a dream where you saw everything clearly, even though your eyes didn't work, and she believed the dream." Chisom's chest was tight. She breathed through it. "I lost my baby 3 days later," Park Mire said. Her voice was steady, but Chisom could hear the grief underneath it. Old grief, worn smooth by years, but still present. "Before I left, before I went back to Korea, I taught her the lullaby, our family song. My sister used to sing it when we were children. I had planned to sing it to my own child." She paused. "I told her, teach this song to your daughter, so she knows where to find her way home." Chisom understood now. The lullaby had not been random. It had not been coincidence. It had been a message, passed from one woman to another in a hospital ward, carried across an ocean, sung every night to a child who didn't know its significance. And when that child had sung it in a Lagos marketplace, a man who knew the song, whose wife had sung the same song, had heard it and stopped. "You're Baek Ejun's sister-in-law?" "Yes. My sister Jisoo married him 23 years ago. I was there at their wedding. I watched them fall in love, and I watched him fall apart when she died." She paused. "He blamed me partly. I don't know why. Maybe because I survived when she didn't. We stopped speaking. 16 years now."
Chisom absorbed this. "He heard the song in the marketplace," she said slowly. "The song you taught my mother. He heard it and he stopped because it reminded him of Jisoo." "Yes. So I exist, I'm here, I'm his daughter, because you taught my mother a song in a hospital 12,000 kilometers away." Park Mire was quiet for a moment. "You exist because the world is stranger than we understand, because grief connects us in ways we don't expect, because your mother's kindness in a hospital ward echoed across 12 years and brought you to the one person who could hear it." She paused. "I believe they sent you to each other. I've always believed that." Chisom was very still. She had said the same thing to Baek Ejun once, in the music room, the first night she'd played the lullaby. "I think they sent us to each other." She hadn't known how true it was. They talked for 3 hours. Park Mire told her about her mother, the things Chisom had been too young to remember, the things she had never known. How Neka had laughed, how she had sung, how she had talked about her unborn daughter like she was already a person, already significant, already loved beyond measure. Chisom told her about Seoul, about growing up in the compound, about the piano room and the lullaby, and the night Baek Ejun found her playing his wife's instrument and gone to his knees in the doorway. They cried, both of them, at different moments for different reasons. By the end, Chisom understood something she had not understood before. Her life was not an accident. It was not luck. It was not coincidence. It was the result of a woman's kindness in a hospital ward, a kindness that had rippled outward for 12 years, carried in a song, waiting to be heard by the right person in the right moment. Her mother had sent her home. She just hadn't known it until now. "I want you to come to Seoul," Chisom said. They were standing at the door. Chisom was preparing to leave. She had a train to catch, a flight to arrange, but something had been building in her chest for the last 3 hours, and she couldn't leave without saying it.
"I want you to meet my father, properly, not as a memory of something painful, but as family." Park Mire was quiet. "We haven't spoken in 16 years. I know, and maybe you never will again. Maybe the silence is too old, too heavy, but I don't think you should die without seeing him, and I don't think he should live without making peace with you." Silence. "You're very direct," Park Mire said. "I'm blind. I have limited patience for performances I can't see." Park Mire laughed. It was a good sound, lighter than before, surprised. "Your mother was direct too," she said. "She told me things about myself I didn't want to hear, and she was always right." Chisom smiled. "Will you come?" A long pause. "Yes," Park Mire said. "I'll come." The reunion was not healed. 16 years of silence doesn't dissolve in an afternoon. Baek Ejun met Park Mire in the garden, the same garden where Chisom had told Mujin about Lee Hyun-chol, what felt like a lifetime ago. They stood 10 feet apart and looked at each other with the wariness of people who have shared grief and not forgiven each other for surviving it. They talked, quietly. Chisom couldn't hear what they said. They had moved out of range, deliberately, wanting privacy. But she heard the silence afterward, the quality of it, different from before. Not healed, but beginning. She was in her room that evening when Mujin appeared. His footsteps were wrong, too fast. His breathing was wrong, too tight. "What happened?" she asked. "There's been an attack. They hit the convoy. Your father is alive, but he's not conscious." Chisom stood. Her body moved before her mind gave it permission. "Where is he?" "Seoul General, ICU. They're working on him now." She was already moving toward the door. Her cane found the wall, found the corridor, found the stairs. "Who did this?" she asked. Mujin was behind her, keeping pace. "We're working on it. The attack was coordinated, professional, military-grade weapons, someone with resources. Huengjin Wu. We don't know that yet. I know it." Her voice was flat, cold, the voice of someone who had been preparing for this moment without knowing it. He's been waiting for an opportunity. The consortium is deadlocked. My father is the obstacle. Remove the obstacle, and the deadlock breaks. She reached the front door. A car was already waiting. Take me to him, she said, and start preparing files on every consortium member, every alliance, every vulnerability. Why? She turned toward him, not looking at him. She never looked at anyone, but facing him directly, the way she did when she wanted you to understand she was absolutely serious. Because if my father doesn't wake up, I'm going to need to hold his empire together, and I'm going to need to do it in the next 6 hours. Picture this: a hospital room, private, high security, the kind of room that costs more per night than most people make in a month. In the bed, a man is unconscious. Machines breathe for him. Monitors track his heartbeat, his blood pressure, the electrical activity in his brain. He is alive, technically, medically, legally alive, but he is not here, not really. He is somewhere far away, fighting battles no one can see. Beside the bed, a young woman sits. She is 19 years old. She has been blind since birth. She is holding his hand, and she is listening to the rhythm of his heart on the monitor, memorizing it, as if she could keep him alive by remembering. Her name is Chisom, and she is about to become the most powerful person in Seoul. The attack had been surgical. 3 vehicles, coordinated ambush, military-grade weapons, and tactical precision that suggested either former special forces or someone with enough money to hire them. The convoy had been hit on a stretch of road between the compound and the city center, a route that should have been secure, that had been secure for years. Someone had known the timing. Someone had known the route. Someone had been watching. Baek Ejun had survived because his driver had reacted faster than should have been possible, taking 2 bullets in the shoulder while steering the armored vehicle off the road and into a concrete barrier that deflected the secondary attack. 3 of his security team were dead. 2 more were in critical condition, and Baek Ejun was unconscious with swelling in his brain that the doctors said was serious but not necessarily fatal, the kind of language that meant they didn't know. Chisom had been at the hospital for 6 hours. She had not eaten, she had not slept. She had sat in the chair beside his bed and held his hand and listened to the machines that were keeping him alive, and she had felt something she had not felt since she was 7 years old in a Lagos marketplace. Terror. Pure, complete, paralyzing terror. Because if he died, if he left her the way everyone left her, the way her parents had left her, the way the world had been trying to take people from her since she was old enough to understand what loss meant, she couldn't finish the thought. Mujin found her at hour 7. "The consortium meets in 6 hours, he said. His voice was rough, exhausted. He had been awake as long as she had, running interference, coordinating security, trying to hold things together while everything fell apart. They're going to vote on restructuring. If someone from our organization isn't there, I'll be there," Chisom said. Mujin stopped. "What? I'll be there, at the meeting, representing my father." "Chisom, who else?" She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Who else can speak for him? Who else knows what he knows, has heard what he's heard, understands the landscape the way he understands it? She turned toward him. "I've been listening for 12 years, Uncle Mujin. Every meeting, every phone call, every negotiation that happened in rooms people thought I wasn't paying attention to. I know this empire better than anyone except him." Mujin was quiet. "And if they don't accept you, then they'll learn to." She let go of her father's hand, stood. "Tell them the daughter is coming," she said, "and prepare the files I'll need." 5 hours. That was all she had.
5 hours to prepare for a meeting that would determine whether everything her father had built would survive. She didn't waste a minute. Phone calls first. Every ally, every contact, every person who owed Baek Ejun something or feared him enough to stay loyal. She called them herself, no intermediaries, no buffers, just her voice, calm and certain, explaining the situation in exactly the amount of detail each person needed.
Most of them were shocked to hear from her directly. A few were confused. A telling few, were already calculating how to benefit from the chaos. She noted those names, filed them away. Then, intelligence. She needed to know who had ordered the attack. Not immediately, that investigation would take time, but she needed to know who benefited from the chaos, who had been waiting for this moment, who was already moving. Hwang Jin-woo, the Consortium member who wanted her eliminated. His name kept surfacing. He's been making calls since the attack, Moo Jin reported, reaching out to swing votes. He's positioning himself as the solution, stability, continuity, a steady hand while Baek Ejun recovers. Or doesn't recover. Yes. Chisom absorbed this. What does he want? Your father's territory, his shipping routes, his political connections. Moojin paused. And you, gone, permanently. He's been very clear about that. Then I'll need to be very clear too. The final hour before the meeting, she spent alone. She sat in the music room, the piano room, her father's wife's room, the place where everything significant seemed to happen. She didn't play. She just sat, her hands resting on the keys, breathing. She was terrified. She had been terrified since the moment she learned about the attack, and she was still terrified now, and the terror was not going away. It lived in her chest like a second heartbeat. It whispered that she was not ready, not strong enough, not enough. She breathed through it. Fear is information. It tells you the stakes. She knew the stakes. She knew what she stood to lose. She knew what would happen if she failed. She also knew what she was capable of. 12 years of listening, 12 years of learning, 12 years of preparing for something she hadn't known was coming but had been ready for anyway, because preparation was what she did, because the world had taught her early that survival belonged to the people who saw things before they happened. She placed one finger on middle C. Pressed. Let the note ring. She could do this. The meeting room was exactly as she had imagined it. She had never been inside. The Consortium's private spaces were beyond even her reach, but she had built a picture from the fragments she'd gathered over 12 years, the layout, the acoustics, the number of people who would be present and where they would sit. 7 men. The surviving Consortium members, seated around a table that cost more than most houses, waiting for someone to take control of a situation that had spiraled beyond anyone's control. She entered alone. No security, no Moo Jin, nothing that suggested she needed protection. Just her cane and the sound of 7 men going silent as she walked to the head of the table, not a chair on the side, not a subordinate position, the head, and sat down. "Gentlemen," she said, "I appreciate you accommodating my schedule." Silence. Absolute silence. She could feel their eyes on her, could feel the weight of their assessment, calculating, measuring, trying to determine what she was and whether she was a threat. Good. Let them calculate. She continued, "I understand there's a question of succession, whether Baek Ejun's position remains stable during his recovery, whether his territory, his alliances, his operations continue under existing management." She paused. "I'm here to remove that question from consideration." Movement. A chair shifting. Hwang Jin-woo, she assumed, the specific quality of controlled aggression in his breathing gave him away. "With respect," a voice said, Park Chan-sik, the man she had met months ago,
This is a matter for the Consortium to decide. Your presence here is unusual. My presence here is necessary. My father is incapacitated. I am his designated representative in matters of business continuity. The documentation is on file with your secretariat. It has been since I turned 18. She smiled slightly. I understand the confusion. Nobody expected I would ever need to use it. Silence.
"You're a child," Huang said. His voice was precisely as she had imagined, sharp, contemptuous, the voice of a man who saw her blindness and her age and her gender and concluded that she was an obstacle to be removed. "You have no experience, no standing, no—" "I have 12 years of information," she said, "about everyone in this room." The room went very still. "I have listened to my father's conversations since I was 7 years old. I've memorized alliances, debts, relationships, vulnerabilities. I know things about the operations in this room that even some of the people running them don't know." She turned her face toward Huang Jinwu, again, directly, precisely, as if she could see him. "For example, Mr. Huang, the shell company you used to route shipping fees through Singapore, the one your accountant set up 3 years ago without Consortium approval, the one that's been skimming approximately 2% of gross revenue from the Eastern port operations." Complete silence. "I've known about it for 2 years," she said. "I never mentioned it because it didn't concern me. My father knew about it too. He considered it a useful piece of leverage to hold in reserve." She paused. "Consider it no longer in reserve." Huang's breathing had changed. She could hear it. The rapid, shallow breaths of a man who had just been cornered. "I'm not here to threaten anyone," she continued. "I'm here to ensure continuity. My father's empire remains intact under my stewardship until he recovers. Anyone who challenges this will find that I am not my father. I am not violent by preference. But I have spent my entire life preparing for rooms I cannot see, and this room is no different." She let the silence build. "The vote," she said. "Let's have it." One more thing. Before the vote, before they could raise their hands or speak their positions, Chisom spoke again. "There's one more matter," she said. "The attack on my father. 3 of his security team are dead. 2 more may not survive the night. Someone in this room knows who ordered it." The silence changed, became heavier, more dangerous. "I'm not accusing anyone, not yet, but I want to be very clear about something. When my father wakes up, and he will wake up, there will be an investigation, and whoever ordered that attack will be found." She turned her face toward Huang Jinwu again. "But I'm patient. I can wait." The vote was unanimous. Not because they respected her, not because they trusted her, because every person in that room understood in the space of 15 minutes that underestimating Chisom Obi was a mistake they could not afford to make. She had walked into the most dangerous room in South Korea, alone, blind, 19 years old, and she had walked out with everything. Mujin was waiting outside. "How did it go?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. She was processing, the adrenaline still coursing through her, the terror that had not quite faded, the reality of what she had just done settling into her body like weight. "They voted yes," she said. "Unanimous?" "Yes." Mujin was quiet for a moment. "You terrified them." "Good." She started walking toward the exit. "Take me back to the hospital. I need to see my father." "There's something else," Mujin said. "Something I didn't want to tell you before the meeting." She stopped. "What?" "The investigation into the attack. We found something. The tactical team that hit your father's convoy, they weren't just hired guns. They were former military intelligence, trained by the same unit Nam Do-wan served in 20 years ago." Chisom was very still.
Nam Do-wan is gone, she said. We destroyed him.
We destroyed his position, his power, his reputation. Mujin's voice was careful. But he's still alive, and someone's been communicating with him. Someone inside the consortium. Huang? We don't know yet, but whoever it is, whoever ordered this attack, they weren't just trying to remove your father. They were trying to remove you. The timing, the consortium meeting, the vote on restructuring. He paused. Someone wanted you to walk into that room unprepared. Someone wanted you to fail. Chisom absorbed this. And instead, you terrified them. You took the vote. You took control. Mujin's voice was strange, almost impressed. Whoever's behind this, they didn't expect that. They're recalculating right now. Good. Let them recalculate. She started walking again. And Uncle Mujin? Yes. Find them. Whoever ordered the attack, whoever's working with Nam Da-wan, find them before they find me. The hospital room was quiet. She sat beside his bed again, the same chair, the same position, her hand wrapped around his. The machines beeped their steady rhythms. The monitors tracked the slow business of his body fighting to survive. She had held it together. She had done what needed to be done. She had walked into that room and become someone she hadn't known she could be. And now, in the quiet, in the dark, with no one to perform for, she let herself break. Not sobbing, not loud, just tears, silent, running down her face. The tears of someone who had spent 12 years being strong and had finally reached the limit of what strength could carry. I did it, Appa, she said. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. I held it together. I did what you would have done. Better, maybe. I don't know. The machines beeped. The monitors hummed. Now you have to wake up. You have to come back, because I still need you to teach me things. You promised. You promised you would never leave me. You said it in the kitchen, the day I called you Appa by accident. You said never, not for anything in this world. Silence. So come back, she said. Please, come back. His hand moved, faint, almost imperceptible, just the slightest pressure against her fingers, but real. She inhaled sharply. The monitor blipped, changed rhythm. Uncle Mujin? She called. Get a doctor, now! 1 month later. The compound was quiet, the kind of quiet that came with late afternoon in winter, when the light faded early and the world settled into its evening rhythms. Chisom sat at the piano. The music room was exactly as it had always been. The same piano, the same chair by the window, the same faint smell of wood polish and old memory. She had spent more hours in this room than any other in the compound. It had become hers as much as it had ever been anyone's. She began to play the lullaby. Slowly, carefully, letting each note breathe before moving to the next. Behind her, footsteps. She knew them immediately. She had known them since she was 7 years old. The specific weight, the rhythm, the almost imperceptible hesitation on the third step from the door where the floorboard creaked slightly. He was thinner. He moved more carefully than before. She could hear it in the pace of his steps, the slight pause between movements. A month of recovery had left marks that would take more time to fully heal. But he was there. He was alive. He was home. He sat down beside her on the bench, the same way he had sat beside her on the first night when she had found the piano and he had found her playing his wife's song. She kept playing. You held it. I held it. They're afraid of you now. Good. Silence. The lullaby continued. I'm proud of you, he said. His voice was softer than she'd ever heard it, the voice of someone who had come very close to leaving and understood, finally, what leaving would have cost. Your mother would be proud of you, both your mothers. She stopped playing. Her hands rested on the keys. The room was very quiet. I know, she said. I can hear it. She smiled. and she played the final notes of the lullaby, the same notes she had played in a Lagos marketplace when she was 7 years old, the same notes that had stopped a man in his tracks, the same notes that had built a family from nothing. The music ended. The room was quiet. Outside, Seoul was dark and sleeping. Inside, 2 people sat together, father and daughter, both survivors, both carrying scars that no one else could see. He made it almost to the end of the silence before his breathing changed. She heard it. She always heard it. She didn't say a word. She was kind that way. And that is the story of Chisom Obi. Not the girl Lagos threw away. Not anymore. The woman Seoul learned to respect. The daughter who became the throne. She did not ask for this life. She was sold into it for less than the price of transport fare, and she turned it into something that will outlast every man who ever underestimated her. She still plays the lullaby every Sunday morning in a room that belongs to all the women who taught her to listen, her mother, her father's wife, the aunt she found in Busan, and the sound of her own heartbeat telling her, always, that she is exactly where she is supposed to be. Her father recovered, fully. He returned to his position, but something had shifted. He delegated more, trusted more, let her sit in rooms she had only listened to before. She was no longer his secret weapon. She was his partner. Park Mire moved to Seoul. She visits the compound every Sunday afternoon. She sits in the garden with a man she once blamed for surviving, and they talk about the sister they both lost, and sometimes they just sit in silence and let the years of hurt begin to heal. Uncle Emeka was never heard from again. Whether he found peace or simply found distance, Chisom didn't know. She didn't need to. She had said what she needed to say. The rest was his burden. Wang Jinwoo was found 3 months later. The evidence trail led back to him. The attack, the connection to Nam Do-won, the years of conspiracy against the Baek family. He was also the code designation Mujin had recovered from Silwa's documents the previous year, the identity they had spent months tracing, the real architect, the one who had been watching from inside the consortium all along. His removal from the consortium was quiet. His disappearance was quieter. Chisom did not ask questions. Some answers, she had learned, were better left unheard. The consortium still meets. Chisom still listens. And when they talk about the future, they factor her into their calculations, not as a weakness to exploit, but as a force to respect. She went on to graduate first in her class at Yonsei, International Law. She took everything Baek Ejun had built and made it untouchable, not through force, but through structure, through contracts and precedents, and the kind of careful, methodical work that turns power into permanence. And every night, before she sleeps, she hums a lullaby that belongs to all of them, to her mother, who learned it in a hospital ward, to her father's wife, who sang it every Sunday morning, to the aunt who taught it across an ocean, to the marketplace where everything ended and everything began. God follows her, and now so does everyone else. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe so you never miss what we bring next. Like this video and tell me in the comments which part hit you the hardest, the marketplace, the consortium, the moment she said, "You promised you would never leave me." I want to know. Until next time, God follows us all.